Hello everyone. In today's video, I bring you the incredible story of Levi Straker, a former police officer who died and came back with a shocking revelation from Jesus. The secret he discovered about prayers will leave you speechless. Before we start, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss any updates. Now, get ready for this life-changing journey. My name is Levi Straker, and I never imagined I would be here telling this story. If someone had told me a few years ago that I would go through an experience that would completely change my outlook on life, I probably would have laughed in their face. After all, what could surprise a former military police officer who had seen it all? I spent years serving in war zones, facing the worst humanity has to offer. I saw things no one should see. I made choices no one should have to make. I carried the weight of these decisions for a long time, thinking I had already experienced everything life could throw at me. I was tough, or at least I thought I was. I was proud of my strength, both physical and mental. I believed that nothing could shake me, that I was prepared for any challenge. But life has a funny way of proving us otherwise. The real battle, as I discovered, would not take place on any battlefield. It would unfold inside my own body, in a hospital, far from any conflict zone I knew. It was there, lying in a hospital bed, that I faced the biggest challenge of my life. It all started with what seemed like just persistent fatigue. At first, I didn't pay much attention. After all, who doesn't feel tired from time to time? But little by little, this fatigue turned into something more, something that all my years of military training could not have prepared me to face. A rare autoimmune disease was diagnosed, which began attacking my heart. Within a matter of months, I found myself tied to a hospital bed, fighting not against external enemies, but against my own body. It was a silent, invisible battle, but no less brutal than any I had ever faced. And that's how my journey to discover what it really means to live and pray began. A journey that would take me to the limits of existence and back, forever changing my understanding of life, death, and everything in between. What I'm going to tell you next is something I'm still trying to fully understand. It is an experience that defies logic and reason, something that goes beyond what we can see or touch. But it's real as anything I've ever experienced, and it's a story that needs to be shared, not for me, but for what it represents. Get ready for a journey beyond the limits of life as we know it, a journey that taught me the true meaning of love, faith, and human existence. It all started on a seemingly ordinary night at the hospital. I had been hospitalized for weeks now, my body growing weaker, fighting an illness that seemed relentless. The doctors were doing their best, but I could see in their eyes that their options were running out. That night, I felt something different. It was as if every cell in my body knew something was about to happen. The fatigue I had been feeling for months seemed to have reached its peak. Breathing became an almost unbearable effort. Suddenly I felt a sharp pain in my chest, so intense it made me gasp. It was as if someone had gripped my heart with an iron fist. The world around me began to blur, colors blending into an indistinct haze. I heard the distant sound of machine alarms, the agitated voices of nurses and doctors. But everything seemed so far away, as if I were listening through a thick wall. My eyes began to close, too heavy to keep open. Then something happened that I will never forget. As my body fought to stay alive, I felt like something inside me was breaking loose. It was a strange feeling, like I was being pulled out of my own body. Suddenly, I found myself floating above the bed. I looked down and saw my own body, motionless, surrounded by doctors and nurses working frantically. It was a surreal scene, like watching a movie in which I was the unwitting protagonist. The strangest thing was that he wasn't afraid. On the contrary, there was a feeling of calm, of detachment. I observed everything with a distant curiosity, as if it no longer mattered to me. I saw the doctors using the defibrillator, trying to get my heart to beat again. I saw the look of concern on their faces, the sweat on their foreheads as they struggled to bring me back. But I felt disconnected from it all. As I floated there, I began to realize that something bigger was happening. It wasn't just my body that was dying. It was as if my entire existence was about to undergo a profound transformation. It was then that I felt a force pulling me. It wasn't a physical force, but something subtler, more powerful. It was as if the universe itself was calling me, and I had no choice but to answer that call. Without resistance, I let myself be carried away by this force. The hospital room, my body, the doctors, everything began to disappear. I was enveloped by complete darkness, an absolute emptiness that seemed to swallow everything. At that moment, I understood that I had crossed a threshold. He was no longer in the world of the living, but he had not reached a final destination either. I was in a place between worlds, a space where the rules of reality I knew no longer applied. And it was there, in that void, that my true journey began. A journey that would lead me to confront not just my mortality, but the entire meaning of my existence. The darkness that enveloped me was unlike anything I had ever experienced. It wasn't just the absence of light, but the absence of everything. There was no sound, there was no tactile sensation, there was nothing but absolute emptiness. At first, this lack of stimuli was disorienting. I didn't know if I was moving or still, if I had a body or was just pure consciousness. Time seemed to not exist in that place. Seconds or millennia could have passed, I couldn't say. But as I got used to this emptiness, I started to notice something. It was not a visual or auditory perception, but a kind of deep intuition. I felt like there was something missing, something I couldn't see or touch, but I knew had to be there. It was then that I understood. What was missing was the presence of God. This realization hit me with overwhelming force. I, who had never been particularly religious, suddenly desperately missed this divine presence. At that moment, something inside me broke. All the hardness I had built up over the years, all the emotional barriers I had put up, all of that fell away. For the first time in a long time, I felt vulnerable, exposed, and it was in that vulnerability that I did something I hadn't done in years. I prayed. It was not a formal or elaborate prayer. It was a silent cry of the soul, a desperate cry for connection, for meaning. As if responding to my plea, I noticed a subtle change. In the midst of that impenetrable darkness, I noticed a point of light. It was so small and far away that at first I thought it was just my imagination. But the light persisted. Little by little, it became bigger, brighter. It was not a blinding or aggressive light, but soft and welcoming. It emanated an energy that attracted me irresistibly. Without thinking, I started moving towards her. I don't know how I moved in that void, but I felt that every part of my being yearned for that light. It was as if she was calling me, inviting me to something greater. As I approached, the light expanded, filling my entire field of perception. The emptiness began to dissipate, replaced by a feeling of warmth and welcome that I had never experienced before. It was then that I had my first great revelation. Praying wasn't just speaking or repeating words. It was a deep connection, a total surrender. At that moment, I understood that every act of kindness, every gesture of love, was a form of prayer. The light now completely enveloped me. It was like being embraced by something infinitely bigger than myself. I felt a love so pure and unconditional that it made me cry, not with sadness, but with a joy that was beyond words. In that embrace of light, all the broken pieces inside me felt like they were being restored. Wounds I didn't even know I carried were being healed. It was as if, for the first time in my life, I was truly at home. And it was there, bathed in that divine light, that I received a clear and powerful message. Levi, live each day as a prayer. It's not your words that matter, but your actions. The love you share with the world is the greatest way of prayer. This message resonated with every fiber of my being, forever changing the way I understood life and my purpose in it. Surrounded by that transcendental light, I felt a presence stand out. It was not something I could see with my eyes or hear with my ears, but a perception that went beyond the physical senses. It was as if the very fabric of reality was opening to reveal something greater. At that moment, I knew, with a certainty that went beyond any doubt, that I was in the presence of God. Not the God I imagined the few times I thought about religion, but something infinitely greater, deeper, and more loving than any human concept could encompass. Communication did not happen with words. It was a direct flow of understanding, an exchange of consciousness that transcended language. Each word was a universe of meaning, each sentence an eternity of understanding. The love that emanated from this presence was overwhelming. It was a love that made me feel small and insignificant, but at the same time gave me a purpose so grand that I could barely comprehend it. I understood that I was just a small channel of something infinitely larger, a drop in the ocean of divine love. In this fellowship, I received profound insights into the nature of existence. I saw that the universe was not a cold, impersonal machine, but a living organism, pulsating with consciousness and purpose. Every atom, every particle, was imbued with this divine love, all part of a greater plan that our human minds could barely comprehend. I understood that life was not a series of random events, but a carefully orchestrated journey for the growth and evolution of each soul. Every challenge, every pain, every joy was an opportunity to learn and expand. I also saw that free will was real and sacred. God did not directly interfere with our choices, but was always present, offering guidance and unconditional love, regardless of our actions. One of the most profound revelations was about the interconnected nature of all existence. I saw that we were all connected, not just to each other, but to all of creation. Every thought, every action, reverberated through the fabric of the universe, affecting the whole in ways we could not even imagine. In this state of divine communion, time seemed to not exist. It could have been an instant or an eternity, I couldn't say. But every moment was filled with a knowledge and understanding that went beyond any earthly wisdom. As I absorbed these cosmic truths, I felt a wave of gratitude so deep that it seemed to emanate from every particle of my being. Gratitude for life, for existence, for every experience that brought me to that moment. It was then that I felt an irresistible desire, a deep need to see Jesus. It wasn't an intellectual desire or a casual curiosity. It was a yearning of the soul, a call that came from the depths of my being, and as if responding to this unspoken desire, the divine presence began to transform, preparing me for an encounter that would forever change my understanding of love, sacrifice, and divine purpose. The moment I expressed my desire to see Jesus, the light around me seemed to intensify. It was as if the very fabric of reality was rearranging itself to meet my request. And then, in the blink of an eye, he was there. The presence of Jesus was unlike anything I had ever experienced. He was surrounded by an even more intense light. But somehow, that light didn't dazzle. On the contrary, it seemed to clear my vision, allowing me to see him with a clarity that went beyond physical eyes. His countenance conveyed a calm and wisdom that was almost palpable. There was a depth in his eyes that seemed to contain all the knowledge of the universe, but what impressed me most was the love that emanated from him. It was a love so pure, so unconditional, that it made me feel accepted and loved in a way I had never experienced before. I tried to fix his image in my mind, to record every detail of his face. But, curiously, every time I tried to fix the image, it seemed to disappear from my memory. It was as if his appearance was beyond my ability to understand or remember. Still, his presence was undeniable and overwhelming. Jesus did not speak with audible words. Instead, he showed me, and what he showed me was something I will never forget. With a simple gesture, Jesus began to guide me on a journey through my own life. It was as if we were watching a movie, but a movie in which I could feel every emotion, relive every moment with stunning clarity. Interestingly, it wasn't the moments when I did something right or wrong that stood out the most. What impacted me most were the moments when I justified hurting others. Every time I thought I was right to make someone suffer, I felt intense pain. It was the pain of seeing that I had hurt other human beings, even though I believed I was doing the right thing. This revelation was a hard blow. I understood that the true weight of my actions was not in the actions themselves, but in the justifications I created to hurt others. I saw how I had often used my position, my strength, or my supposed moral superiority to cause pain, always convincing myself that it was necessary or fair. But Jesus didn't show me this with judgment or condemnation. On the contrary, his gaze was full of compassion and understanding. It was as if he was saying to me, "See, understand, and learn." And I learned. I learned that every person I had hurt was just as valuable as I was in God's eyes. And I learned that true strength isn't in hating others, but in loving them unconditionally. As this life revealed, Jesus began to teach me three main lessons that remained engraved in my soul. The first lesson was about living prayer. Jesus showed me that praying is not just talking, but living. Every gesture of kindness, every act of love is a form of prayer. It is through our actions that we show our true connection with God. The second lesson was about accepting suffering with joy. Jesus made me understand that suffering is not a punishment, but an opportunity to show love and generosity to the world, even in the midst of pain. He taught me that it is possible to face adversity without becoming bitter, transforming suffering into a source of growth and compassion. The third and final lesson was about sharing God's love. Jesus showed me that my new mission in life was clear: to be a channel of divine love to everyone around me. That was my true purpose, the reason I was being sent back. When these lessons were imparted, I felt a profound shift within me. It was as if every cell of my being had been reconfigured, aligned with a new purpose. I looked at Jesus one last time, feeling a gratitude that words could never express. He smiled, a smile that held all the love in the universe, and I knew it was time to go back. When I understood that it was time to return, I felt a slight resistance within me. Part of me wanted to stay in that place of eternal peace and love, but another part, a part that now understood my true purpose, knew that there was still much to be done on earth. Jesus, with a look full of understanding and love, made me understand that my earthly journey was not yet complete. There were people to help, love to share, lessons to teach. I had been transformed by this experience, and now it was my mission to bring that transformation to the world. As I began to move away from Jesus' presence, I felt as if I was being gently pulled back. It was a strange feeling, like I was swimming against an invisible current, but a current that was guiding me where I needed to go. As I walked away, the intense light that surrounded me began to dim, not all at once, but gradually, like the sunset on a summer day. Little by little, the darkness approached again, but this time it was not a frightening or empty darkness. It was more like a tunnel, a path back to the life I had left. As I walked through this tunnel, flashbacks of my life flashed past me in quick succession, but now, I saw them with new eyes. Every moment, every choice, every interaction took on new meaning in light of what I had learned. I saw my childhood, my years of military service, the moments of joy and pain. I saw the people I had loved and the people I had hurt. But instead of judgment, I felt deep compassion for that Levi from the past, who didn't fully understand the impact of his actions. As I approached the end of the tunnel, I began to hear distant sounds, the beeping of hospital machines, muffled voices of doctors and nurses. Physical reality was becoming closer by the second. Suddenly, I saw my body in front of me, still lying on the hospital bed. It was a surreal sight, like looking at a stranger I knew intimately. For a brief moment, I hesitated. Returning meant facing physical pain, the limitations of the body, the challenges of earthly life. But then I remembered the lessons I had learned, the purpose I had been given. With renewed determination, I turned to my body. The moment I returned to inhabit my physical body was intense. It was as if every nerve, every cell, was awakening from a long sleep. I felt a sharp pain in my chest, reminding me of the condition that had almost taken my life. My eyes slowly opened, blinking against the fluorescent hospital light. The sounds around me became clearer, the steady beeping of heart monitors, the buzz of surprised voices, the sigh of relief from someone nearby. I tried to speak, but my throat was dry and sore from the breathing tube. A nurse quickly approached, her eyes wide with astonishment and joy. "He's back," I heard her shout to someone out of my field of vision. In the minutes that followed, I was surrounded by a medical team, all checking my vitals, asking questions, expressing their astonishment at my sudden recovery. But I barely heard them. My mind was full of the experiences I had lived, the lessons I had learned. I was back, yes. But it was not the same man who had left that body. He was someone new, transformed by divine love and a purpose greater than he had ever imagined. In the days and weeks that followed my return, I went through a process of readjustment, not only physically, but mainly spiritually and emotionally. My body was weak, still fighting the illness that had almost taken me, but my spirit was stronger than ever, fueled by an understanding and purpose that transcended any physical challenge. The medical team was perplexed by my recovery. They spoke in terms of spontaneous remission and miraculous recovery, seeking scientific explanations for something I knew to be much deeper. I didn't try to explain my experience to them. How could I put something so transcendental into words? Instead, I thanked them for their care with a gratitude that was beyond professional, seeing in each of them a reflection of the divine love I had experienced. As my physical strength returned, I noticed profound changes in the way I saw and interacted with the world. Things that used to irritate me, the noise of traffic, the slowness of a stranger, the small frustrations of everyday life, now seemed insignificant. Instead of irritation, I felt deep compassion for everyone around me, understanding that each person was on their own journey, facing challenges that I couldn't see. My perspective on life and death has also changed radically. Death, which previously caused me fear or, at the very least, discomfort, now seemed like just a transition, a passage to something greater. This didn't mean I didn't value life. On the contrary, every moment became precious, an opportunity to experience the love I had experienced in the afterlife. The priorities that once guided my life now seemed so empty, so meaningless. Professional ambitions, the search for status or material wealth, all of this lost importance in the face of the understanding of what really mattered: loving, serving, being a channel of divine love in the world. I began to see opportunities to help and love everywhere. A smile to a stranger, a kind word to someone who seemed to be having a difficult day, offering help without expecting anything in return. These small actions became my form of daily prayer, my way of living out the lessons I had learned. My relationships have also been deeply affected. People I had hurt in the past, I reached out to ask for forgiveness. Friendships that I had neglected, I sought to reconnect. Each interaction became an opportunity to share love, not in a preachy or imposing way, but through actions and a loving, compassionate presence. Nature, which before I had barely noticed in my busy life, now filled me with awe. Every tree, every flower, every sunset seemed like a miracle, a tangible expression of the divine love that permeates all creation. I started taking time to simply be in nature, feeling a deep connection to everything around me. My relationship with spirituality has also changed drastically. I did not become religious in the traditional sense, adhering to a specific set of beliefs or practices. Instead, I developed a deep, personal spirituality based on direct experience. Praying has become as natural as breathing, not as a formal ritual, but as a constant conversation with the divine, expressed through thoughts, actions, and intentions. This new perspective did not mean that life had become perfect or free of challenges. The physical pain was still present, reminding me of the fragility of the human body. I faced misunderstanding from some who didn't understand my sudden change. There were moments of doubt, moments when the intensity of the experience seemed to diminish in the face of the demands of everyday life. But even in these difficult moments, the memory of the love I had experienced sustained me. Each challenge became an opportunity to practice the lessons I had learned, to choose love and compassion even when it was difficult. And so, day by day, I began to live a life that was itself a continual prayer, a constant expression of the divine love that I had experienced and that now flowed through me to the world. As time passed, I felt an increasingly stronger calling to share my experience with others. It was not a desire to seek attention or recognition, but a deep need to convey the message of love and purpose that I had received. At first, I only shared it with close friends and family. Their reactions ranged from incredulity to fascination, from excitement to confusion. Some immediately embraced the transformation they saw in me, while others had difficulty understanding the depth of the change I had experienced. Little by little, the circle of people who listened to my story expanded. I was invited to speak in small groups, at local churches, at community centers. Each time I shared my experience, I felt like I was fulfilling a part of the purpose I was given. It was not easy to put into words something so profound and transcendental. I often found myself struggling to find the right words to convey the intensity and beauty of what I had experienced. But I realized that, more than my words, it was the change in me, the peace, the love, the compassion that now emanated from me, that touched people most deeply. As my story spread, I began to receive invitations to speak at larger events, to different groups. I spoke to health professionals, seeking to bring a different perspective on life and death. I shared my experience with support groups for people facing terminal illnesses, offering hope and a new perspective on the transition. One of the most rewarding aspects was the opportunity to speak with other former military and security professionals. I was able to share how my experience had changed my view of strength, courage, and purpose. Many identified with my journey, finding in my story a way to deal with their own traumas and doubts. Throughout this process of sharing, I realized that my message resonated in different ways with different people. For some, it was a confirmation of their own spiritual beliefs. For others, it was a challenge to rethink their views on life and death. And for many, it was simply a story of hope and transformation. Not all reactions were positive, of course. I faced skepticism, sometimes open hostility from people who saw my experience as a hallucination or a fabrication. Some scientific circles have dismissed my story as the result of neurological processes during a near-death state. But I learned not to let these negative reactions affect me. I understood that each person was on their own journey, and that it was not my role to convince anyone. My task was simply to share, plant the seed, and let everyone find their own path. One of the most important lessons I learned in this sharing process was the importance of respecting each person's journey. I realized that it was not my place to impose my experience or my beliefs on others. Instead, I learned to offer my story as a gift, something that people could accept or not, according to their own willingness and understanding. Over time, I started writing about my experience. What started as a personal journal to process my thoughts and feelings turned into a book. Writing was a challenging and deeply therapeutic process. Each word made me relive the experience, deepening my understanding and reinforcing the lessons I had learned. The book, when published, reached a much larger audience than I had ever imagined. I received letters and emails from people all over the world, sharing how my story had touched their lives, given hope in difficult times, or inspired profound change. One of the most surprising things was how my experience seemed to transcend religious and cultural barriers. I have received messages from Christians, Muslims, Buddhists, atheists, and people of many other faiths, all finding something valuable in my story. This made me understand even more deeply that the love I had experienced was truly universal, beyond any specific doctrine or dogma. Throughout this process of sharing my experience, I realized that an ongoing transformation was taking place within me. Each time I told my story, each conversation I had with someone touched by it, helped me more deeply integrate the lessons I had learned. It was as if, by sharing, I was reaffirming my commitment to the purpose I was given. I also learned the importance of being authentic and vulnerable when sharing. I didn't hide my doubts, my moments of weakness, or the challenges I still faced. This, I realized, made my story more real and accessible to people. I didn't present myself as someone who had all the answers, but as someone who was on a continuous journey of learning and growth. One of the most profound experiences was when I began receiving invitations to speak with people who were going through their own near-death experiences or dealing with terminal illnesses. Being able to offer comfort, hope, and a new perspective to these people was incredibly rewarding and made me feel like I was truly living my purpose. As my message spread, I began to see subtle but significant changes in the people around me. Friends and family began to reevaluate their own lives, looking for ways to live with more purpose and love. Coworkers began approaching conflicts differently, with more compassion and understanding. I realized that the impact of my experience went far beyond me. It was as if, by sharing my story, I was creating ripples of change that spread in ways I couldn't always see or fully understand. But perhaps the most profound aspect of sharing my message was the constant reminder of the love and connection I had experienced. Every time I talked about it, every time I saw someone's eyes light up with understanding or hope, I felt that divine love flowing through me again. And so, sharing became not just a mission, but a form of prayer, a way of keeping alive and present the transcendental experience that had changed my life forever. Despite the profound transformation I experienced and the peace I found, life after my near-death experience was not without its challenges. In fact, in many ways, the challenges have become more intense, even though my ability to deal with them has changed drastically. One of the biggest challenges was dealing with people's expectations. Many expected me to be some kind of living saint, someone who would never have problems or weaknesses again. When I showed signs of frustration, tiredness, or any negative emotion, some people were disappointed or confused. I had to learn to balance the reality of my transcendental experience with the realities of everyday life. Yes, I had experienced something extraordinary, but I was still human. I was still learning and growing. I learned to be kind to myself in times when I couldn't live up to other people's expectations or even my own. Another significant challenge was dealing with the loneliness that sometimes accompanied my new outlook on life. Although I felt more connected than ever to the divine and humanity as a whole, I often felt isolated in my immediate experience. Few people could truly understand what I had been through, and this sometimes created a distance between me and others, even those closest to me. I had to actively work to build bridges of understanding, to find ways to connect with people on a level that made sense to them without compromising the truth of my experience. This required patience, compassion, and a constant willingness to see beyond appearances and connect with the divine essence in each person. Physical health continued to be a challenge. Although I had recovered from the crisis that almost took my life, my body still bore the scars of that experience. I had to deal with physical limitations and, at times, chronic pain. This became a constant exercise in acceptance and finding ways to live fully despite limitations. My relationship with the material world has also undergone significant changes, which has brought its own challenges. Things that had once seemed important, professional success, material possessions, social status, now seemed hollow compared to what I had experienced. I had to find a new balance, a way to live in the world without being consumed by its worldly concerns. One of the most unexpected challenges was dealing with the ongoing intensity of my spiritual experience. There were days when the awareness of divine love and the interconnectedness of all things was almost overwhelming. In those moments, it was difficult to function in the normal world. I had to learn to integrate this expanded consciousness into my everyday life, to live with one foot in the mundane and the other in the divine. Over time, I realized that these challenges were actually opportunities for continued growth. Every difficulty, every moment of doubt or frustration, was a chance to apply the lessons I had learned, to choose love and compassion even when it was difficult. I developed daily practices to stay centered and connected to the experience I had lived. Meditation, prayer, time in nature, all of these things became anchors that helped me navigate the challenges of everyday life without losing sight of the greater purpose I had discovered. One of the most important lessons I learned in this continuous growth process was the importance of balance. Balance between the spiritual and the mundane, between giving and receiving, between accepting things as they are and working to change them. I learned that true wisdom is not in denying any aspect of the human experience, but in embracing them all with love and awareness. I also discovered that growth never ends. Each day brought new lessons, new opportunities to deepen my understanding and live more fully in the love I had experienced. I realized that the near-death experience had not been an end point, but the beginning of an ongoing journey of discovery and transformation. And so, day after day, facing challenges and celebrating achievements, I continued my journey. A journey of constant growth, of continuous learning, always seeking to live each moment as an expression of the divine love that I had experienced and that I now knew to be the true essence of all existence. Now, looking back at everything I've experienced since that fateful night in the hospital, I feel profound gratitude. Gratitude for life, for the opportunity to have experienced something so transcendental, and for the chance to share this experience with others. My journey since that moment has been one of constant discovery and rediscovery. Each day brings new opportunities to live the truths I have learned, to be a channel for the divine love I have experienced. It's not always easy. There are days when the challenges seem immense, when the memory of that experience seems distant. But in those moments, I take a deep breath and remember. Every breath is a prayer, every action an opportunity to express love. One of the biggest lessons I've learned is that spirituality is not something separate from everyday life. It is not something we do only in moments of meditation or formal prayer. It's a way of living, a way of being in the world. Every interaction, every decision, every moment is an opportunity to live our deepest truth. I also learned that love, the unconditional love I experienced, is not something abstract or distant. It is a real, tangible force that can transform lives. I saw this happen not just in my life, but in the lives of countless people who were touched by my story. I saw people finding hope in times of despair, courage in the face of fear, and purpose where before there was only emptiness. One of the deepest reflections I have is on the nature of reality. My experience has shown me that there is much more to existence than what we can see or touch. There are dimensions of being that go beyond our everyday understanding. This does not diminish the importance of our earthly life. On the contrary, it makes it even more precious. Every moment here is a unique opportunity to grow, to love, to make a difference. Another important lesson was about the nature of death. What was once a theme of fear and anxiety, I now see as a transition, a passage to something greater. This doesn't mean we don't value life, on the contrary. It makes us appreciate each moment even more, knowing that each experience here is precious and unique. Reflecting on my journey, I see how every challenge, every moment of doubt or difficulty was actually an opportunity for growth. The physical limitations I faced taught me patience and acceptance. Moments of misunderstanding from others taught me compassion and empathy. The doubts that sometimes arose led me to a deeper and more authentic faith. One of the most powerful reflections I have is about the interconnectedness of all things. My experience has shown me that we are not separate from each other or from the divine. We are all part of a greater whole, interconnected in ways that go beyond our understanding. This awareness brings with it a great responsibility to treat each person, each being, each aspect of creation with reverence and love. Looking to the future, I feel a mix of humility and purpose. Humility because I know I still have a lot to learn, a lot to grow. Purpose because I know that every day is a new opportunity to live the love I experienced, to be a channel for that love in the world. I don't know what the future holds. I don't know how many more days I will have on this earth. But I know that every day is a gift, an opportunity to make a difference, to spread love, to live fully. For those reading my story, my message is simple. Love is real. It is the most powerful force in the universe. It is available to all of us, at any time. We don't need to go through a near-death experience to access it. It is here, now, waiting for us to recognize it, to experience it. My journey continues. Every day is a new adventure, a new opportunity to learn, grow, and love. And as I breathe, As my heart beats, I will continue to share the message I received. Live each day as a prayer. Love unconditionally. Be a channel for the divine. For this, I believe, is where the true purpose of our existence lies. And so, I conclude my story not with a full stop, but with reticence. For the journey continues, love persists, and life, in all its beauty and mystery, continues to surprise us and teach us at every moment. If you like this beautiful spiritual testimony, leave a like, comment on your impressions, subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to activate the notification bell to watch each new video and help us spread this message to a greater number of people. Until next time.